Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and I hope everybody had a wonderful July 4th. It was beautiful weather up here in Seattle. I think all over the PNW. I know it's pretty hot in some places, and as a Northwesterner, my favorite temperature is about 72 degrees. When it gets up into the 80s or the 90s, I'm fine with that every once in a while, but that's not my favorite temperature. It's part of why I live here. But yeah, it was great being out, great seeing everyone have a good time. Of course, the dogs don't have a good time. My Finn was not having a good time last night. There's a pretty big fireworks show down the street from us. Our streets are lined with cars, everyone coming down to see it on Lake Sammamish, and it was very loud and he was shaking. He was not happy. But he recovered. He's fine. He will get a walk in today and everything will be good. But yeah, we're looking forward to turning the page and getting another Seahawks question answered today. This one, I'm going to kind of go old school. When I first started doing this show over 100 days ago, I would really just wake up and think about what I was curious about, and I would research the answer in real time with all of you without having prepped anything. And the downside of doing that is that, there might be some pauses. I will do my best to talk through them, but it's kind of hard to think and talk and, uh, you know, collate as I'm doing all at the same time. But the upside is, you get to see and hear and participate in my reactions and your reactions. You, as folks watching live, feel free if you want to throw into chat different thoughts or ideas or questions you have as I'm doing it. Feel free. The idea today that I was kind of curious about is, increasingly I'm kind of banking. I don't know if banking is too strong, but I'm really expecting a big jump for the Seahawks on the defensive side of the ball. And I talked at one point about how Sean McVay, in his first year as the youngest head coach in the NFL, took the 32nd ranked scoring offense in LA, or maybe, yeah, I think it was still LA at that point, and turned it into the number one ranked scoring offense in his first season. And I've kind of said it's not a realistic thing for Mike McDonald to do. But I haven't really dug into what are reasonable jumps in defensive rankings over the years and how many teams are making them at what size. So I wanted to look into that. I'm going to do that with you all live. Depending on how long that takes, that might be the whole show. If I have time, if that goes relatively quickly, then I will also be open to taking some other questions from folks, and we'll find some answers out together if you are interested. But totally up to you. And primarily, I will always be looking to our YouTube members, especially club level and above, for their questions and thoughts. And I will try to do my best to find some answers in real time. With that in mind, what do you say we get started? And this is a great time, by the way. Give the show a like and click subscribe. Would really appreciate it. It's definitely something, I put a lot of time into this, and I would appreciate it if people took a second to just show some gratitude by clicking like and subscribing to the channel. It also grows the community, so more people can see this as we continue to grow. Okay, so just setting the stage, the Seahawks, I mean, they weren't the worst in the NFL last year on defense, although it felt like it at times. They were 25th in the NFL in points allowed and 30th in the NFL in yards allowed. Okay. So was not terrific. Some other rankings that you may be curious about, they were 29th in the NFL in points per drive. So even though points were 25th overall, 29th in points per drive, they were 29th in yards per drive. So in a lot of ways, you could probably argue that the Seahawks were the 29th, the third worst defense in the NFL. They were 30th in the NFL in plays per drive. A lot of long drives. They were 32nd, dead last in time per drive for opponents. So not great, not great. That's the point. That's how we're here. But what I wanted to do, I'll talk you through this. My first thought was I want to look up everybody's rankings last year on defense. Should be pretty quick to get that across the NFL. And then I will compare it to the previous year and see who made the biggest jump in a few different statistics. And then we'll see what we think about that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to sort this group by alphabetical order. That is critical to being able to actually see these things in real time. Let me go ahead and create a quick Google Sheet. If you're interested, I'll drop this in so you guys can follow along in the Google Sheet if you're interested. Yeah, let me name this real quick. Defensive rankings changes. Okay. And why not? I will show you what I'm doing. I can't imagine it's going to be that exciting to see me doing Google Sheets, but I'll talk you through what I'm finding as I'm doing it. All right. I'll also just offer that I don't know about you guys, but as a person who's spent a lot of time in tech, I every place that is coming up with these AI based assistants to help me in Google Sheets and Google Slides and Gmail and Facebook and wherever else, my first thing I do is close them. I mean, they are not that helpful to me. I've tried a couple times, but for the most part, it's like, get out of my way. So everyone that's I happen to be invested in some AI things, but and I think AI is definitely going to be a big part of our lives. But for the most part, right now, I feel like it's far too intrusive and really is obnoxious. All right, so let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. We'll keep the yards. We don't need to care about turnovers. Sure, we'll keep first downs just in case. Don't need to keep completions or attempts or yards. Those are all passing numbers. Yeah, I'm just going to get rid of all of those. So I think these are probably rushing first downs. Let me check. Yeah, so these are rushing first downs. And these are total first downs. So we don't actually need to keep this either. We don't need to keep the touchdowns or the penalties. And get rid of those. And again, the first idea here is going to be let's keep scoring percentage. And we'll keep, well, I'm going to get rid of the EXP. Turnover percentage, why not? Okay, so this is 2023. Let's go ahead and grab 2022. And we'll do the same thing. I'll try to do it a little bit more quickly. I think I can actually even modify this here. Well, forget it. I don't think I need to. So let's go ahead and grab this table. Team defense. We'll drop this into the next sheet. I'm curious what folks think. Before I get the answer, which defense do you think made the biggest leap in 2023? Which defense had the biggest climb in there. We're going to have a couple different things we'll be able to see here, which is not just um, the biggest climb overall, but their relative numbers that they climbed. So like who had the biggest reduction in points allowed, for example. We'll take a look at that, things like that as well. We'll keep plays. I can't remember. Did I keep turnovers? No, I didn't keep turnovers. So points against yards, plays. Yeah, that all makes sense. Pull out these extra columns so we can take a look. Pull out all of this junk. Get all the way to... we don't need first play. We'll get rid of that. I think that is... Oops, I kept more here. What did I get rid of? Plays, yards per play, first downs, scoring percentage. Oh, I got rid of turnover percentage here. No. Have not gotten rid of experience points. Got it. All right. So now we're all set up here. We've got the two groups alphabetically ordered. What a pain in the butt it is when teams change their name and you've got these alphabetical matches, and then over a few different years, you have to check the order because it changes. Anyway, so let's create a quick summary sheet. There's tons of ways to do this, by the way. I'm just throwing stuff in here right now. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the same header and we're going to bring it over to the summary sheet. And we're going to see basically where the biggest changes were. So we're going to take 2023 and subtract 2022 from it. So what you should get is if the Cardinals allowed more points in 2023, then the number will climb. So they allowed 455 in 2023. They allowed 449 in 2022. So they jumped by they increased by 5 points. So if I then, whoops, that is the wrong cell to do that in. Let me push it there. This is just a list of the teams. So let me grab this list real quick. We'll drop it over here. And then we will do this real quick. And we will pull this over across the board. So first, this is not answering the direct question first. This is just for my interest to see whether or not, and I can zoom in a little bit for folks. I'm sure there's folks that would like to see a little bit more closely what's going on. Hopefully that's a little more viewable. Can I get rid of the links quickly? Yeah, whatever. So what you see here is just a absolute change in points allowed versus the previous year. This is not about rankings yet. I will get into that in a second, but let's just see who made the biggest leap in points allowed. And the way that this will work is we'll sort it descending, excuse me, we'll sort it ascending. Interestingly, the Raiders, I wouldn't have guessed this. The Raiders had the biggest leap in terms of reducing the points allowed year over year. They allowed 87 fewer points in 2023 as they did in 2022. And so just taking a look at that, we can do this really quickly. It's not that hard. Points allowed per game change equals this divided by 17. autofill that guy, and let's get rid of all these extra. So that is dropping their points per game average by 5, which is pretty crazy. 5.1 points per game. Why is this all messed up? There we go. The Bears, who I think someone guessed in chat, dropped their average by 4.9 points. So 5.1 versus 4.9. That's pretty close. Bears and the Raiders definitely jumped. There was also Corey Coleman guessed the Chiefs, who were third. They cut 4.4 points per game off of their average last year. The Texans were one of my guesses. They were negative 3.9. The Vikings were negative 3.8. So you kind of have this grouping here. If I were to do a quick chart, you can kind of see the spectrum of change. And I'll show you what the Seahawks did in a second. But where did this chart go? Oh, there it is. Let's put this in its own sheet so it has some chance of being able to be seen. So you kind of see here, I think there's a better chart for this. Let's do, yeah, I think that's a little bit easier to read or a little easier to consume. So you can see over here, the Commanders on the right-hand side gave up 10 more points per game. That was the worst year-over-year drop. The Raiders are over here on the left, and I'm a little bit of a stickler for this. I want to try to change the axis here, reverse the axis, but I don't know if it's going to let me do that. In any event, no, not going to let me do it. All right. So you've got the worst on the right and the best on the left in terms of improvement. Where are the Seahawks? The Seahawks are right here in the middle. The Seahawks are in the middle. That is not a good thing. It's almost never a good thing. But the Seahawks are basically allowed 0.1 points more per game in 2023 than they did in 2022. When you're already bad, which the Seahawks were in 2022, not improving is, not great. But it's better than dropping over 10 points like the Commanders did last year. I was really surprised. The Eagles were the second worst team in terms of how much more points that they allowed in 2023. And they allowed 5 points more per game. This is where I have questions. I got to say, I think the Eagles are getting by on reputation. They definitely have some talent, but and I even like some of what they did in the offseason. But I think this team looked like one of the worst teams in the NFC over the last half of the year. They lost the starch. Like after the 49ers embarrassed them, they just were not the same team. It was on offense and defense. Jalen Hurts really started to regress. The defense was awful. And while they want to blame it all on, the secondary, and so they drafted these young guys and they'll make a big difference, maybe it will. I mean, I don't think it's crazy that the Eagles got some good secondary players and they could elevate them. My gut instinct, Jason Kelce was a pretty big part of that offensive line. He's retired. Fletcher Cox was a big part of that defensive line. He's retired. They lost Hassan Reddick. Yes, they got Bryce Hall, or is that who they got? Anyway, they got Bryce Huff. And I've been having so much trouble with names lately, mainly because I haven't been putting much thought into it, but it's off-season brain. But in any event, I'm not buying on the Eagles In fact, as someone who's been a rather large supporter of Jalen Hurts over the years, I wouldn't be shocked if Jalen Hurts is a backup within a couple of years. I I think we're seeing some limits of what he's capable of. I yeah, I'm selling on the Eagles, and I think this number here of their defense really dropping in terms of points allowed, I don't think that's a mirage. I think this defense is eroding. Um, so let's take a look at a couple more things here. We've kind of done points allowed, points per game. We might as well do yards allowed and yards per game. Let me do yards per game here. And we'll do the same thing. This would be, we'll just copy that and do this and drag this bad boy down. And we'll see what we got for yards per game last year. Who made the biggest leap? So the Cleveland Browns made the biggest leap in yards per game allowed. They allowed 1,000 fewer yards last year than the year before. That is, we have to take a look at that. That is a massive change. 61 yards per game is huge, huge, huge. And I see this comment from Peter Jacobson, one of our YouTube members, since we'll stay on topic for a second about the Eagles. He says, I really don't know about Keller more, but Fangio should be an upgrade for the Eagles defense. That is true. Fangio is an excellent defensive coordinator. I do think that could help them. I just, in general, I have questions about the Eagles. Man, did I lose respect for their head coach with the just absolute, I don't know how to describe it. All of my words are not appropriate to use, but he was just when he was in Seattle and he was talking crap about to Pete Carroll and just acting like a child. I was like, who do you think you are? Just I don't know, man. I'm selling on the Eagles. Let's just stick with that. All right, so the Browns, 61 yards fewer per game last year. Huge, huge reduction. The Detroit Lions, almost 1,000 yards less allowed themselves, 56 yards per game. The Carolina Panthers, would you have thought this? That the Carolina Panthers defense allowed 1,000 fewer, 956 fewer yards, same as the Lions per game as the Lions did. That's kind of shocking to me. That's really shocking to me. It makes me want to go quickly and look at yards allowed. I mean, the Panthers were, holy crap. The Panthers were 4th in the NFL in yards allowed last year. Did you guys know that? I did not know that. That is really surprising to me. I am like, no wonder Elijah Evero is a hot coaching candidate. That was a guy who did really great work in Denver and then goes to Carolina and does that in a season with as much turmoil and crap that was going on and as bad as that offense was. That is really impressive. That is shocking. I'm speechless almost. Minnesota Vikings 4th. They had 944 yards or 55 yards a game. The Bears again, 879 yards less or 51 yards per game. And then the Texans 830, 48.8 yards per game. Where were the Seahawks on this list? Seahawks gave up 164 more yards per game than they did in 2022. That's about 10 yards more per game. That is not one of the better showings. The Commanders, again, absolute disaster on defense. Really curious what the Commanders made a lot of changes to improve on offense. We'll see what they've done. I mean, obviously they added Bobby and Frankie Louvu and some other stuff on defense. But when you get rid of Montez Sweat and Chase Young, who I'm not a huge Chase Young fan, but you get rid of those guys, I don't know that they've really replaced them. And then you've got, I'm not sure I see the story where they've dramatically improved. Although I really like Mike Sainristil. That was a fantastic pick. They had the draft of, like, they had one of the best drafts, if not the best draft in the NFL this year. So I do think the Commanders are on the come. By the way, Eagles gave up almost 1,000 yards more last year, 929 more yards, 54.6. The Bengals are a group to talk about as well. The Bengals gave up the second largest increase in yards allowed, 997 yards, almost 1,000 yards more in 2022. Last thing I want to, let's just do a couple pieces here. Let's look at yards per play. And actually I don't need to do that because it's per play. So I can just sort this guy. Let's sort it in reverse order. Did I just? No, that's descending A to Z. There you go. Browns dropped almost a yard per play, which is a huge drop. The Bears and the Browns, 0.8 yards better per play year over year. The Lions were 0.7. A bunch of teams are 0.7. The Lions, the Vikings, the Falcons are an interesting group to see here, and the Ravens. The Ravens. Yes, the Ravens were 0.7. So a few of the teams, the Seahawks, just as we know, no change. The same yards per play, the same defense that they had been a year prior. Let's take a look at first downs just to see this real quick. Browns gave up 75 fewer first downs. That's an astounding number. The Seahawks gave up 33 more first downs last year. That is a lot. That's basically 2 per game, 2 additional first downs per game last year than they did the year before. And just remember, the Seahawks defense has been bad for a while. So when you're decreasing, I mean, these are the reasons why the Seahawks have a new coach. This is scoring percentage of scoring drives, percentage of drives where there's points scored for the opponent. The Browns saw their rate drop by almost 14%. If we scroll down, look for the Seahawks, they actually increased their rate by 3.2% last year. All right, let's now try to take a look and see who's made the biggest jump in terms of rankings. So this is another piece to pull out here. Actually, we're going to do it. We are going to do it this way. We'll do points allowed first. And we want to get A to Z. Whoops. Let's get this. Forgot to drag a couple things together. There we go. Let's go A to Z and let's compare rankings. So I'm just going to do this real quick. Whoops. Going to rank these teams in order by points allowed last year. And we're going to grab that and we're going to put it right next to points allowed this year in this column here. So points allowed ranking year over year change. Let's drop that. We're gonna have to do the same thing over here. And I'm sure there's a better way to do this. If I was doing this offline, I would do this much more cleanly, but I am just doing it quick and dirty here. All right, so sorting 2022 by points allowed. So we have another ranking here. Actually, that is not going to work. That is not going to work. So in order to see the difference in ranking, gonna have to have them in the same alphabetical order again. So that was why I did it in the first place, realizing that. Going to have to keep it associated with the name of the team. So we're going to just do this right now. We're going to grab these two columns here, create another sheet, drop this for 2022. Then we're going to go to 2023 and we're going to grab this for 2023. And this is points allowed rankings. Boop. Copy. And we'll do 2023 here. So let's take a look at some of the most likely candidates based off of what we just found out. If we go back to our summary, who were the teams that had the largest jumps in points allowed per game, or points allowed overall? So let's, oops, what happened here? Something is awry. Oh, I know why. Never mind. Hold on. Let's go back to sorting the right way. There we go. There we go. All right. So the Raiders and the Bears were the teams that had the biggest leaps in points allowed year over year. So let's take a look at their rankings, and the change. Okay. So the Ravens went plus two. The Chiefs, let's just go in order. Why not? This is easy. We can do this together. Chiefs, wow, from 16 to 2. So that's a 14 jump, a 14 ranking jump in points per game. The 49ers, -2. Suck it, 49ers. I'm expecting that number to continue to drop. I think this defense is on the decline. The Bills went -2. The Cowboys went +1. The Steelers went +4. The Bucks went +6. The Saints went +1. The Raiders, I bet this is going to be a big number. Raiders went from 26th to 9th. That is what we're looking for, folks. That is what we're looking for. That is the model we're looking for the Seahawks. Going to want to dig into the Raiders a little bit more as an example. So that is a 17-point jump in the rankings, a 17-spot jump. The Packers also had a pretty big jump. They jumped 7 spots. The Texans, another one that could be one to look at. They went from 27 to 11. That is a 16-point jump. The Jets dropped actually a number of spots. They dropped 8 spots. The Browns climbed 7 spots. The Vikings the Vikings went from 30th to 14th. That is a 16 spot jump. That's another group I think to check into and look at. I think we're finding our groups to look at. The Patriots, I don't know that they changed much. The Patriots were 11th. Okay, they did drop 4 spots. The Titans dropped 1 spot. The Jaguars dropped 5 spots. The Falcons, I think they climbed, right? Falcons had to have climbed. Maybe not. Maybe the Falcons defense has been better than I've given it credit for over the years. Falcons climbed. Okay, they went from 23rd to 18th. So I take that back. They've been bad. The Rams climbed 3 spots. Interesting. The Bears. I mean, it's kind of crazy the Rams climbed 3 spots given the turnover and young players that they had out there. The Bears went from 32nd to 20th. That's a 12-spot jump. That's something at least worth us checking into a little bit more. The Bengals, I think we have higher hopes than that, but the Bengals, they went from 5th to 21st, 16-point drop. The Dolphins climbed 2 spots. The Lions went from 28th in points allowed to 23rd. That's a 5-point climb. The Chargers dropped 3 spots. The Seahawks, no change. The Seahawks. The Giants dropped 8 spots from 18th to 26th. The Broncos, what did the Broncos do? Wow. The Broncos had quite the drop, didn't they? Okay, I thought they were even higher in 2022. They went from 14th to 27th. So that is a 13-point drop. The Colts, they climbed 1 spot from 29th to 28th. The Panthers, I thought I already said the Panthers. No, I think I was talking about another team. Okay. The Panthers went from 19th to 29th. So that is a 10-point drop. That's kind of interesting. So they gave up all these points, but the yards were massively better. We're going to do yards as well because I want to look at that. But that must be just, I mean, the offense was so bad and there's so many turnovers. I think there's probably a lot of short fields. Maybe that's also why the yardage wasn't as bad because there weren't as many sustained drives, but we'll take a look. The Eagles, wow, what a drop for the Eagles from 8th to 30th in points allowed. That's going to test my math skills. What is that? 22 point spot, a 22 spot jump or drop in the rankings. Yikes. The Cardinals, 31st, no change for the Cardinals. They are just as bad as they were. The Bears and the Commanders, they dropped, oh my goodness, from 7th to 32nd. Yikes. That is a huge drop. That's a 25-point drop. That is the most. Ooh, wow. Yikes. That's tough. So, at least the Seahawks are just consistently crappy, but some of these teams are moving around quite a bit. So I want to take a look. I'm going to change gears. I'll come back and look at yards. Well, let's do yards now. And then we will do see like combined which teams are the most interesting. All right. So let's duplicate this and we'll just do yards per game, jump. And gonna have to go back and do a couple things for what is this 2022. So let's look at 2022, and we will sort by yards allowed, and we will grab the list of teams 2022. Drop them in here, and then got to go back and sort it alphabetically. And then we will sort here by yards allowed. And we will grab this group. And we will drop it in here. All right. And go back and sort this appropriately or by alphabetically. And we'll go back and we'll do this really quick again. So the Browns, they made a 13-point improvement. They were first in yards allowed last year. The Chiefs, they jumped from 12 to 2. That's a 10-point jump. The Jets climbed 2 spots. The Panthers, this is going to be a big one, I think. The Panthers jumped from 22nd in yards allowed to 4th. Whew. That is an 18-point jump, 18-spot jump in the rankings for the Panthers and yards allowed. The Cowboys, they climbed 8 spots from 13th to 5th. The Ravens climbed 4 spots. Interestingly, they climbed 4 spots. Well, no, they climbed 4 spots in yards allowed. The Patriots, they climbed 2 spots from 9th to 7th. That's going to be a sneaky tough game, by the way, folks. That Patriots game. I would not sleep on that defense that the Patriots are running out there. The 49ers dropped. Oh, poor 49ers. They dropped 6 spots from 2nd to 8th in yards allowed. I'm telling you, that defense is eroding. The Bills dropped from 1st to 9th. So that's an 8-point drop as well. Another team that I love, but unfortunately I think is going the wrong direction. The Dolphins climbed, right? Where were the Dolphins last year? They were 18th and they went, or in 2020, they were 18th. They climbed to the top 10. So that's a nice 8 spot in the rankings jump. The Falcons went from 27th to 11th. That is a 16-point jump. It's impressive. That is impressive. The Bears went from 29th to 12th. That is a 17-point jump. Is that right? 29th to 12th. Wow. So Bears, definitely one of the teams to look at. The Saints went from, where were they? Saints went from 6th to 13th. That is a 6-point decline in the rankings in yards allowed. The Texans in 2023 were ranked 14th. The year before, they were 30th. So that is a 16-point jump for the Texans. The Raiders were ranked 15th last year. Where were they? They were 28th. So that is a 13-point jump. The Raiders defense, I got to say, I have not paid attention. I think the Raiders and the Saints, they factor into the list of teams that I just think are so irrelevant. I just don't pay any attention to them. The Colts are kind of in that bucket as well. Although with Anthony Richardson, they're a little bit more watchable. But for the most part, I'm like, I don't care. I'm sure people think about the Seahawks that way, by the way. But I did not know the Raiders defense made this kind of climb last year. All right. Vikings were 16th last year, up from 31. So that is a 15 spot jump in the rankings for the Vikings. Some pretty big jumps here. So I think one of the things we're learning is you can make pretty big jumps in the yardage rankings. That certainly seems to be the case. The Packers were 17th. That was that a climb for the Packers? The Packers were 17th last year, so no change. No change for the Packers. The Titans were 18th. That is up from 23, so that's a 5-point jump. The Lions were 19th. That is up from 32. So that's a nice, healthy climb of 13 spots. The Rams were at 20th, and that is a 1-spot drop from where they were in 2009 and 22. The Steelers, I think that's going to be a bit of a drop. They were 14th, and they dropped to 21st. So that's a 7-spot decrease in the rankings. The Jags were 22nd, up from 24th. So that's a 2-spot jump. The Bucks were 23rd last year, and where were they? They were 11th. Ooh, so that's a pretty big drop. They dropped 12 spots on defense and yards allowed. The Colts, the aforementioned Colts, they were 16th to 24th. So that is also a big drop of 8 spots. The Cardinals dropped 4 spots. The Eagles, this is going to be ugly. The Eagles went from 3rd to 26th. That is a 23-spot drop in the rankings. Yikes. There's only 32 teams, folks. 23-spot drop is precipitous. The Giants went from 25th to 27th, so that's a 2-spot drop. The Chargers went from 20th to 28th. That's an 8-spot drop. The Broncos were at 29th. That was a huge drop from 8 to 29, 21-spot drop. The Seahawks dropped. They managed to drop 4 spots. Even, they were at 26th and they actually went down, which is hard to fathom. The Bengals, big drop again from 7th to 31. That is a 24-spot drop. And the Commanders went from 4th to 32nd. Yikes. A 28-spot drop. Wow. So if we're taking a look at this, you've got a few teams. So the Panthers increased 18 spots in yards allowed. The Bears climbed 17. The Falcons climbed 16. The Texans climbed 16. This is yards. So I think we're going to find some similarities in who made the jumps in points allowed. The Chiefs climbed 14. The Raiders, let me just double check. Where were the Raiders on this list? Raiders climbed 13 spots in yards. They climbed 17 spots in points allowed. The Texans, the Vikings. So I think we've got a little bit of overlap here. The Texans and the Vikings are 2 teams to look at. I think the Panthers are also a team to look at. One of the things I really like about the Panthers story there is you've got a team that was 22nd in yards allowed, climbing to 4th. That is huge. That's the kind of leap we're looking for the Seahawks. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to get to 4th, but if you climb climb 18 spots from 30th, you're pushing into the top 10, 12th. That would be, if the Seahawks are, around the top 10, that would be a really big jump in yards allowed. Texans, Bears, those are the other 2 teams. Points per game, the biggest jumps that we saw there were the Raiders, Vikings, Texans. So let's take a look at those teams real quick. What happened with those teams in 2023? The Texans, the Vikings, the Panthers. Those are three teams to talk about. And let's first look at the Texans. They got, I believe they got a new coaching staff. Let me just double check a couple things here. I'll get to you on that in a moment. So, yes, last year was D'Amico Ryan's first year as head coach. Sound familiar? Defensive oriented head coach. Everybody talks about the offensive head coaches, and you got to get an offensive head coach. Who was maybe the best rookie head coach in the NFL last year? It was a defensive guy in D'Amico Ryans. And he led a dramatic improvement for them on defense. Who do they have as their defense coordinator is Matt Burke. I don't know a lot about Matt Burke, but to me, that is D'Amico Ryans. It's very similar. I'm sure he was still heavily involved in defensive play calling and defensive game planning for the Texans. As far as players added, right? What did they do in 2023? Everyone knows they drafted Will Anderson. I mean, they drafted CJ Stroud as well, but Will Anderson was a big part of that defense. If I take a look at some of their grades last year, by team, we'll look at the Texans, look at their defense. So Derek Barnett was their highest graded defender. It was his first season in Houston. So a veteran addition there at edge. Derek Stingley. This was a highly graded, highly drafted player who did not have a great 2022. He had a 49 grade in 2022. He jumped to 82.1 in 2023. Derek Stingley became one of the best corners in the NFL in his second season. So you had some player development, some young player development going on. Blake Cashman, who no relation to Josh Cashman, as far as I'm aware. This was their linebacker, who I really was hoping the Seahawks might go after in free agency. He had a huge jump. This guy was a journeyman. He had his best grade, like the most snaps he'd ever played was 424 snaps as a rookie for the Jets in 2019. He had a 49 grade that year. His grade the year before in Houston, 2022, 54. His grade in 2023 was 82.1. He had a huge jump. Why do you think that happened? Do you think Blake Cashman just figured out how to play football? No. D'Amico Ryans, a linebacker by trade who came in with a specific idea of how he wanted the defense to play and how he wanted the linebackers to play, took a 54 graded linebacker and turned him into an 82 graded linebacker in one season. So if you're looking at guys around the Seahawks and you're like, I don't know about this Tyrell Dodson guy. Can he really be? I don't know about Tyrese Knight. Can he really be? We're going to see. Linebacker is the spot that Mike Macdonald has taught the longest, been obsessed with the longest. It is one of the biggest question marks on this team. And we might be looking at that midseason and being like, what were we asking about? Mike's got this on lock. Will Anderson, again, defensive rookie of the year, 81 grade as a rookie. Jonathan Greenard. This was a guy that also took a leap, had his best season, 14 sacks, never had double digits before. He made a huge jump. So you're seeing, when you see this many guys take big jumps year over year, I'm just going down the line. Every single guy I'm clicking on is having either a career year or an improved year with the new coach. You can't just tell me it's like, "Oh, this all coincidentally happened." It absolutely coincides with a new coach and a new philosophy, a new scheme. There are some additions that they made. Let's take a look at um, Texans 2022 free agent signings. Let's see. That's 2024. This is 2022. Uh, excuse me. They brought back Malik Collins. They brought back Desmond King. Terrence Brooks. No, they brought him back. Yeah, it looks like. Let's see. Texans 2023 free agent signings. I think this might be the one I'm looking for. Yeah. All right. This looks correct. Did they have Denzel Perryman? They did. He did not play well for them though, so it wasn't a free agent addition there. Corey Littleton. How did Corey Littleton play for them? He was a free agent addition. He barely played. So that wasn't it. Sheldon Rankins. He did play for them. Did all right. Nothing great. Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward was a big signing for them. He's a really good player, and he played pretty well for them last year. I mean, nothing fantastic, but pretty well. Javier Thomas, defensive back. Not familiar with him or his game. He does not look like he played. Derek Rivers, Hassan Ridgeway. How did Ridgeway do for them? Did he play? Ridgeway, barely played. So, I mean, this really, I'm just double checking my instincts and not just assuming I've got this right. For the Texans, the jump that we saw from them really, really looks like two things. One, new coaches. Two, young player development or drafted player. So their big draft pick from the previous year, Derek Stingley, absolutely jumps in his level of play. And then Will Anderson comes in, new defender. He makes a big impact. But the vast majority of it, if I'm putting a credit pie to this, I'm putting 80% of the credit to the coaching change. The personnel did not change that much year over year for the Texans defense. And they were able to do what? The Texans climbed in 16 spots. They went from 27th to 11th in points allowed. And they went from 30th to 14th in yards allowed. Folks, that might be the model. That might be the model. If you told me that the Seahawks could be 11th in points allowed and 14th in yards allowed next year, how many of you would take that? I would. It's not like the highest I hope they go, but my God, to be a solidly above average defense. And I absolutely believe Mike McDonald, I think he brings more to the table than D'Amico Ryans. I think that what they've got in Adam Dirty and what they've got in Carl Brooks and what they've got in general in that locker room and the coaching staff, I think that it's going to be, I really believe it's going to be one of the best coaching staffs in the NFL over the next few years before it gets picked apart. So that is a role model for the Seahawks. The Texans jump which is primarily coaching based. Let's look at another one. Let's look at the Vikings. All right. The Vikings, as a reminder, the Vikings made a 15 spot jump in yards per game. They made a 16 spot jump in points per game. So let's take a look at the Vikings. All right. What happened with the Vikings last year? We know, I'm pretty sure we know that there was also a change in defensive play caller in Minnesota. Kevin O'Connell was still the coach, but if we look at their defensive coordinator, they went from Ed Donatel, who Packers fans will tell you, not a good guy to have as your defensive coordinator. They went from Ed Donatel in 2022 to Brian Flores, who I thought did one of the best jobs in the NFL with the Dolphins. I thought his getting fired, although Mike McDaniel is amazing, Brian Flores, I thought was doing fantastic work with Miami. And I think it's a shame that he got pushed out the way he did. By the way, he's a guy I would have been interested in as a head coach for the Seahawks. I have a lot of respect for his coaching. He took over. So again, we got a new scheme. We got new blood in terms of leadership. But let's just check it. What about from a personnel perspective? What about from a personnel perspective? Did the Vikings have, maybe it wasn't as much coaching, maybe a lot of it was changes to personnel. So one guy in their draft class that's worth talking about actually wasn't in their draft class. I think he was an undrafted free agent. Was Ivan Pace Jr., a linebacker, who was their second highest graded player on defense. That is one part of the story. Their highest graded player was Danielle Hunter. And Danielle Hunter had a career year or close to it, tied for his career high in sacks, second in his career in pressures. He had a good year and he played the whole year. So health, I think, is another thing. He was obviously their best defender. No one would have doubted that. He has missed some snaps in prior years. He played over 1,000 snaps last year, and that turned into a big year for them, for him. Let's see. Jordan Hicks also played well for them. Jordan Hicks, it was his second year, but he had a jump in his level of play. He's a linebacker. He went from a 66 graded player to a 75 graded player. That probably would seem to be attributed to a change in scheme and coach. Cameron Bynum was a player who had a drop in his level of play in 2023. He jumped from a 58.7 in 22 to 73.2 in 23. This is the second year starter for him. He made a big jump. How much did Brian Flores have to do with that? What other reason would these guys just be making these jumps in their level of play? Mekhi Blackman, he was a rookie. He was a rookie for them. He was drafted in the 3rd round, cornerback. He played well for them. So again, young talent coming in, infused, and then coaches helping other guys have their best years. Anthony Barr, he did not play that much last year due to injury. They did not have a lot of guys play particularly well, which is really interesting. I'm looking down like that. I've basically gone through all the guys that were graded at 70 or better on defense already. They only had 6 guys graded at 70 or better on defense. But I think what you had in general was just a better coach defense, better play calling, and some guys making leaps. Plus, you had a little bit of good health luck with a guy like Daniil Hunter. But again, if I'm given credit pie here, it's got to be 80% coordinator, because you're dealing with almost the same roster that you had the year before and getting significantly better performance. So that's the Vikings. And the Vikings, folks, as a reminder, the Vikings climbed 16 spots from 30th to 14th. That's 16. Thank you. 30th to 14th in points per game. They jumped 15 spots from 31st to 15th in yards per game. And again, I think that's very realistic to expect from Mike Macdonald, which is these are teams that were the bottom third of the league in defense in 2022, and they jumped to either middle of the pack or above, like close to top 10. I mean, that feels, we've seen, like, that's the second team we've seen. Now let's look at a third team. Let's look at the Carolina Panthers, who also made an astronomical jump. Their jump in yards per game last year, they jumped all the way to fourth, 18 spot jump from 22nd to fourth. Let's look at the Carolina Panthers. And I have a feeling, if I'm remembering correctly, this is again going to be something that points to a change in who's calling the play and who's doing the scheme. If you look at who they drafted in 2023, I mean, DJ Johnson was a third-round linebacker pick, and Jamie Robinson was a fifth-round defensive back pick. We'll look at some of the players, but as far as who was their defensive coordinator, it was Elijah Evero after Al Holcomb and Phil Snow in 2022. Again, I know this is sounding like repetitive, and this is not planned. You guys all saw me do this in real time. I didn't know these teams were the ones that made the biggest leaps. I could have done all this research ahead of time. But again, part of the fun of doing this in real time together is we get to learn at the same time, and we get to have our own reactions to this, and the story gets to kind of unfold. So you see, this is how I do my research. I don't come in with a bias of here's what you do to get a better defense, and here's how much is realistic to improve. We have seen a number of these examples where defenses have jumped like 15 to 18 spots in the rankings in one season. And so far, the connective tissue with how they did that has been coaching. It has not been that they get some amazing free agent class. It has not been that they drafted the perfect player. Yes, the Texans got Will Anderson. That absolutely factored in, no doubt. But Will Anderson is not why Blake Cashman had the year of his life. He is not why Derek Stingley had the career year he did. It is not why all those other guys I mentioned had career years for the Texans. That is a systemic change, not an acute, like, local change. So here we are with the Panthers. Again, Elijah Evero takes over as defensive coordinator. Let's take a look at their talent on defense. I cannot believe that they were fourth in the NFL in yards per game. Kind of wild. I want to take a quick look at something here, because if we look at scoring percentage per drive, that's 32. Wasn't bad. The Panthers ranked 22nd in scoring percentage per drive. I would bet that is also because of their offense. If I look at yards per play, I mean, the Panthers were sixth in the NFL in yards per play, which takes out some of the what length of drive we're talking about. That's just an outstanding jump. outstanding work by Elijah Evero. So their best player on defense, Derek Brown, has been a great player. He had, guess what? He had his career year, 90 grade. Now it's just up from 84.4, which is 84.4 is good, but it's still a huge jump. So big jump there. JC Horn was their highest graded corner. Guess what? His career year, 84 grade, up from 71.4 the year prior. Xavier Woods had been there the year before. Guess what? Career year, 80.3 grade, up from 63.5 the year prior. Frankie Louvu, linebacker. Did not have a career year, but did have a big jump. His career year was in 2021 when he had an 84.8 grade. I will say you could argue this was his career year, though, because in 2021, he only played 249 snaps. Thank you. Ejiro Evero. It's not Elijah. I don't know why I keep saying Elijah. Ejiro. Thank you. Gosh, I'm going to get these names right one of these days. Anyway, so Frankie Louvu only played 249 snaps in 2021. In 2023, he played 989. So he wasn't even a starter in 2021. He made a big jump in 2023 under Ejiro Evero in 2023. So you could argue it was his career year as well. Brian Burns, who we all know, no longer on the team, he had a jump in his grade from 64.5 to 73.8. I could keep going, folks, but these are all guys that were already on the team. They were already there. Here's another guy, Marquise Haynes. Has anybody heard of Marquise Haynes? He went from a 59.3 grade to a 71.9 grade. All right. Guy, name after name after name after name, as I go down this list, had a huge impact from their new defensive coordinator. Ejiro Evero. I'm going to say it as many times to get it out of my head. So, I mean, that's three teams, folks, that have made massive leaps. In each case, the biggest part of that change was not talent. You cannot tell me the biggest change to the Texans, to the Vikings, or to the Panthers was talent-based. It was coaching. And this is why I think everybody is still sleeping on the Seahawks. The Seahawks made the biggest offseason move of any team in the NFL when they went from Pete Carroll and the staff that he was running to Mike McDonald and this staff. So this is pretty exciting to me. I honestly didn't know what I was going to find coming in. Based on what I found, I think there's a lot of reasons to feel optimistic. I hope you guys feel the same way. Give the show a like, click subscribe, sign up as a YouTube or Patreon member. Would love to have you guys join the community. Really, really appreciate the likes and subscribes. All that's great. We're getting closer and closer. We're a couple weeks away from training camp starting. Hopefully, I'll be able to give you some additional coverage for that. Still working that through, but in any event, I hope everyone had a wonderful July 4th. Have a great rest of your Friday. I'm Brian Nemhauser. This has been episode 103 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, everybody.